The Reconstruction of Religious Thought in Islam by Dr. Muhammad Iqbal. Lecture 4. The Human Ego, His Freedom and Immortality. The Quran, in its simple, forceful manner, emphasizes the individuality and uniqueness of man and has, I think, a definite view of his destiny as a unity of life. It is in consequence of this view of man as a unique individuality, which makes it impossible for one individual to bear the burden of another and entitles him only to what is due to his own personal effort, that the Quran is led to reject the idea of redemption. Three things are perfectly clear from the Quran. Number one, that man is chosen of God. Afterwards, his Lord chose him, Adam, for himself and turned towards him and guided him. 21:22. Number 2. That man, with all his faults, is meant to be the representative of God on earth. When thy God said to the angels, Verily, I am about to place one in my stead on earth, they said, Wilt thou place there one who will do ill therein and shed blood? When we celebrate thy praise and extol thy holiness, God said, Verily I know what you know not. 2:30. And it is he who hath made you his representatives on the earth, and hath raised some of you above others by various grades, that he may prove you by his gifts. 6:165. Number 3. That man is the trustee of a free personality which he accepted at his peril. Verily, we proposed to the heavens and to the earths and to the mountains to receive the trust, but they refused the burden and they feared to receive it. Man undertook to bear it, but hath proved unjust, senseless. 33:72. Yet it is surprising to see that the unity of human consciousness, which constitutes the center of human personality, never really became a point of interest in the history of Muslim thought. The Mukallimin regarded the soul as a finer kind of matter or a mere accident which dies with the body and is recreated on the day of judgment. The philosophers of Islam received inspiration from Greek thought. In the case of other schools, it must be remembered that the expansion of Islam brought within its fold peoples belonging to different creed communities such as Nestorians, Jews, Zoroastrians, whose intellectual outlook had been formed by the concepts of a culture which had long dominated the whole of Middle and Western Asia. This culture, on the whole, Magian in its origin and development, has a structurally dualistic soul picture, which we find more or less reflected in the theological thought of Islam. Devotional Sufism alone tried to understand the meaning of the unity of inner experience, which the Quran declares to be one of the three sources of knowledge, the other two being history and nature. The development of this experience in the religious life of Islam reached its culmination in the well-known words of Hallaj, I am the creative truth. The contemporaries of Hallaj, as well as his successors, interpreted these words pantheistically, but the fragments of Hallaj collected and published by the French Orientalist Louis Massignon leave no doubt that the martyr saint could not have meant to deny the transcendence of God. The true interpretation of his experience, therefore, is not the drop slipping into the sea, but the realization and bold affirmation in an undying phrase of the reality and permanence of the human ego in a profounder personality. The phrase of Hallaj seems almost a challenge flung against the Mukallimin. The difficulty of modern students of religion, however, is that this type of experience, though perhaps perfectly normal in its beginnings, points in its maturity to unknown levels of consciousness. Ibn Khaldun long ago felt the necessity of an effective scientific method to investigate these levels. Modern psychology has only recently realized the necessity of such a method, but has not yet been able to go beyond the discovery of the characteristic features of the mystic levels of consciousness. Not being yet in possession of a scientific method to deal with the type of experience on which such judgments as that of Halaj are based, we cannot avail ourselves of its possible capacity as a knowledge yielding experience. Nor can the concepts of theological systems draped in the terminology of a practically dead metaphysics be of any help to those who happen to possess a different intellectual background. The task before the modern Muslim is, therefore, immense. He has to rethink the whole system of Islam without completely breaking with the past. Perhaps the first Muslim who felt the urge of a new spirit in him was Shah Waliullah of Delhi. The man, however, who fully realized the importance and immensity of the task and whose deep insight into the inner meaning of the history of Muslim thought and life, combined with a broad vision engendered by his wide experience of men and manners, would have made him a living link between the past and the future, was Jamaluddin Afghani. If his indefatigable but divided energy could have devoted itself entirely to Islam as a system of human belief and conduct, the world of Islam, intellectually speaking, would have been on a much more solid ground today. The only course open to us is the approach modern knowledge with a respectful but independent attitude and to appreciate the teachings of Islam in the light of that knowledge, even though we may be led to differ from those who have gone before us. This I propose to do in regard to the subject of the present lecture. In the history of modern thought, it is Bradley who furnishes the best evidence for the impossibility of denying reality to the ego. In his ethical studies, he assumes the reality of the self. In his logic, he takes it only as a working hypothesis. It is in his appearance and reality that he subjects the ego to a searching examination. Indeed, his two chapters on the meaning and reality of the self may be regarded as a kind of modern Upanishad on the unreality of the Jiv Atma. According to him, the test of reality is freedom from contradiction, and since his criticism discovers the finite center of experience to be infected with irreconcilable oppositions of change and permanence, unity and diversity, the ego is a mere illusion. Whatever may be our view of the self, feeling, self identity, soul, will it can be examined only by the canons of thought, which in its nature is relational, and all relations involve contradictions. Yet, in spite of the fact that his ruthless logic has shown the ego to be a mass of confusion, Bradley has to admit that the self must be, in some sense, real, in some sense, and indubitable fact. We may easily grant that the ego, in its finitude, is imperfect as a unity of life. Indeed, its nature is wholly aspiration after a unity more inclusive, more effective, more balanced, and unique. Who knows how many different kinds of environment it needs for its organization as a perfect unity? At the present stage of its organization, it is unable to maintain the continuity of its tension without constant relaxation of sleep. An insignificant stimulus may sometimes disrupt its unity and nullify it as a controlling energy. Yet, However, thought may dissect and analyze. Our feeling of egohood is ultimate and is powerful enough to extract from Professor Bradley the reluctant admission of its reality. The finite center of experience, therefore, is real, even though its reality is too profound to be intellectualized. What then is the characteristic feature of the ego? The ego reveals itself as a unity of what we call mental states. Mental states do not exist in mutual isolation. They mean and involve one another. They exist as phases of a complex whole called mind. The organic unity, however, of these interrelated states, or let us say events, is a special kind of unity. It fundamentally differs from the unity of a material thing, for the parts of a material thing can exist in mutual isolation. Mental unity is absolutely unique. We cannot say that one of my beliefs is situated on the right or left of my other belief. Nor is it possible to say that my appreciation of the beauty of the Taj varies with my distance from Agra. My thought of space is not spatially related to space. Indeed, the ego can think of more than one space order. The space of waking, consciousness, and dream space have no mutual relation. They do not interfere with or overlap each other. For the body, there can be but a single space. The ego, therefore, is not space bound in the sense in which the body is space bound. Again, mental and physical events are both in time, but the time span of the ego is fundamentally different to the time span of the physical event. The duration of the physical event is stretched out in space as a present fact. The ego's duration is concentrated within it and linked with its present and future in a unique manner. The formation of a physical event discloses certain present marks which show that it has passed through a time duration, but these marks are merely emblematic of its time duration, not time duration itself. True time duration belongs to the ego alone. Another important characteristic of the unity of the ego is its essential privacy, which reveals the uniqueness of every ego. In order to reach a certain conclusion, all the premises of a syllogism must be believed in by one and the same mind. If I believe in the proposition, all men are mortal, and another mind believes in the proposition, Socrates is a man, no inference is possible. It is possible only if both the propositions are believed in by me. Again, my desire for a certain thing is essentially mine. Its satisfaction means my private enjoyment. If all mankind happen to desire the same thing, the satisfaction of their desire will not mean the satisfaction of my desire when I do not get the thing desired. The dentist may sympathize with my toothache and cannot experience the feeling of my toothache. My pleasures, pains, and desires are exclusively mine, forming a part and parcel of my private ego alone. My feelings, hates, and loves, judgments, and resolutions are exclusively mine. God Himself cannot feel, judge, and choose for me when more than one course of action are open to me. Similarly, in order to recognize you, I must have known you in the past. My recognition of a place or person means reference to my past experience and not the past experience of another ego. It is this unique interrelation of our mental states that we express by the word I. And it is here that the great problem of psychology begins to appear. What is the nature of this I? To the Muslim school of theology, of which Ghazali is the chief exponent, the ego is a simple, indivisible, and immutable soul substance, entirely different from the group of our mental states and unaffected by the passage of time. Our conscious experience is a unity because our mental states are related so as many qualities to this simple substance which persists unchanged during the flux of its qualities. My recognition of you is possible only if I persist unchanged between the original perception and the present act of memory. The interest of this school, however, was not so much psychological as metaphysical, but whether we take the soul entity as an explanation of the facts of our conscious experience or as basis for immortality. I am afraid it serves neither psychological nor metaphysical interests. Kant's fallacies of pure reason are well known to the student of modern philosophy. The I think which accompanies every thought is, according to Kant, a purely formal condition of thought, and the transition from a purely formal condition of thought to ontological substance is logically illegitimate. Even apart from Kant's way of looking at the subject of experience, the indivisibility of a substance does not prove its indestructibility, for the indivisible substance, as Kant himself remarks, may gradually disappear into nothingness, like an intensive quality, or cease to exist all of a sudden. Nor can this static view of substance serve any psychological interest. In the first place, it is difficult to regard the elements of our conscious experience as qualities of a soul substance in the sense in which, for instance, the weight of a physical body is the quality of that body. Observation reveals experience to be particular acts of reference, and as such, they possess a specific being of their own. They constitute, as Dad acutely remarks, a new world and not merely new features in an old world. Secondly, if we regard experiences as qualities, we cannot discover how they inhere in the soul substance. Thus, we see that our conscious experience can give us no clue to the ego regarded as a soul substance, for by hypothesis, the soul substance does not reveal itself in experience. And it may further be pointed out that in view of the improbability of different soul substances controlling the same body at different times, the theory can offer no adequate explanation of phenomena such as alternating personality, formally explained by the temporary possession of the body by evil spirits. Yet the interpretation of our conscious experience is the only road by which we can reach the ego, if at all. Let us therefore turn to modern psychology and see what light it throws on the nature of the ego. William James conceives consciousness as a stream of thought, a conscious flow of changes with a felt continuity. He finds a kind of gregarious principle working in our experiences which have, as it were, hooks on them and thereby catch up one another in the flow of mental life. The ego consists of the feelings of personal life and is, as such, part of the system of thought. Every pulse of thought, present or perishing, is an indivisible unity which knows and recollects. The appropriation of the passing pulse by the present pulse of thought and that of the present by its successor is the ego. This description of our mental life is extremely ingenious, but not, I venture to think, true to the consciousness as we find it in ourselves. Consciousness is something single, presupposed in all mental life, and not bits of consciousness mutually reporting to one another. This view of consciousness, far from giving us any clue to the ego, entirely ignores the relatively permanent element in experience. There is no continuity of being between the passing thoughts. When one of these is present, the other has totally disappeared. And how can the passing thought, which is irrevocably lost, be known and appropriated by the present thought? I do not mean to say that the ego is over and above the mutually penetrating multiplicity we call experience. Inner experience is the ego at work. We appreciate the ego itself in the act of perceiving, judging, and willing. The life of the ego is a kind of tension caused by the ego invading the environment and the environment invading the ego. The ego does not stand outside this arena of mutual invasion. It is present in it as a directive energy and is formed and disciplined by its own experience. The Quran is clear on this directive function of the ego. And they ask thee of the soul. Say, the soul is seated from my Lord's Amar, command, but of knowledge only a little to you is given. 1785. In order to understand the meaning of the word Amar, we must remember the distinction which the Quran draws between Amar and Khalaq. Pringle Patterson deplores that the English language possesses only one word, creation, to express the relation of God and the universe of extension on the one hand, and the relation of God and the human ego on the other. The Arabic language is, however, more fortunate in this respect. It has two words, khalaq and amar, to express the two ways in which the creative activity of God reveals itself to us. Khalaq is creation, amar is direction. As the Quran says, to him belong the creation and the direction. The verse quoted above means that the essential nature of the soul is directive, and as it produces from the directive energy of God, though we do not know how divine Amar functions as ego unites. The personal pronoun used in the expression Rabba throws further light on the nature and behavior of the ego. It is meant to suggest that our soul must be taken as something individual and specific, with all the variations in the range, balance, and effectiveness of its unity. Every man acteth after their own manner, but your Lord well knoweth who is best guided in his path. 1784. Thus, my real personality is not a thing, it is an act. My experience is only a series of acts mutually referring to one another and held together by the unity of a directive purpose. My whole reality lies in my directive attitude. You cannot perceive me like a thing in space or a set of experiences in temporal order. You must interpret, understand, and appreciate me in my judgments, in my will, attitudes, aims, and aspirations. The next question is, how does the ego emerge within the spatio-temporal order? The teaching of the Quran is perfectly clear on this point. Now, of fine clay, we have created man. Then we placed him, a moist germ, in a safe abode. Then we made the moist germ a clot of blood. Then we made the clotted blood into a piece of flesh. Then we made the piece of flesh into bones, and we clothed the bones with flesh. Then brought forth man of yet another make. Blessed therefore be God, the most excellent of makers. 23, 12 to 14. The yet another make of man develops on the basis of the physical organism, that colony of sub-egos through which a profounder ego constantly acts on me and thus permits me to build up a systematic unity of experience. Are then the soul and its organism two things in the sense of Descartes, independent of each other, though somehow mysteriously united? I am inclined to think that the hypothesis of matter as an independent existence is perfectly gratuitous. It can be justified only on the ground of our sensation of which matter is supposed to be at least a part cause. other than myself. This something other than myself is supposed to possess certain qualities called primary, which correspond to certain sensations in me, and I justify my belief in those qualities on the ground that the cause must have some resemblance with the effect. But there need be no resemblance between the cause and effect. If my success in life causes misery to another man, my success and his misery have no resemblance with each other. Yet everyday experience and physical science proceed on the assumption of an independent existence of matter. Let us therefore provisionally assume that body and soul are two mutually independent yet in some mysterious way united things. It was Descartes who first stated the problem, and I believe his statement and final view of the problem were largely influenced by the Enochian inheritance of early Christianity. However, if they are mutually independent and do not affect each other, then the changes of both run on exactly parallel lines owing to some kind of pre-established harmony, as Leibniz thought. This reduces the soul to merely passive spectator of the happenings of the body. If, on the other hand, we suppose them to affect each other, then we cannot find any observable facts to show how and where exactly their interaction takes place, and which of the two takes the initiative. The soul is an organ of the body which exploits it for physiological purposes, or the body is an instrument of the soul, are equally true propositions on the theory of interaction. Lang's theory of emotion tends to show that the body takes the initiative in the act of interaction. There are, however, facts to contradict this theory, and it is not possible to detail these facts here. Suffice it to indicate that even if the body takes the initiative, the mind does enter as a consenting factor at a definite stage in the development of emotion, and this is equally true of the other external stimuli which are constantly working on the mind. Whether an emotion will grow further or that a stimulus will continue to work depends on my attending to it. It is the mind's consent which eventually decides the fate of an emotion or a stimulus. Thus, parallelism and interaction are both unsatisfactory, yet mind and body become one in action. When I take up a book from my table, my act is single and indivisible. It is impossible to draw a line of cleavage between the share of the body and that of the mind in this act. Somehow, they must belong to the same system, and according to the Quran, they do belong to the same system. To him belong khalq, creation, and amar, direction. How is such a thing conceivable? We have seen that body is not a thing situated in an absolute void. It is a system of events or acts. The system of experiences we call our soul or ego is also a system of acts. This does not obliterate the distinction of the soul and the body. It only brings them closer to each other. The characteristic of the ego is spontaneity. The acts composing the body repeat themselves. The body is accumulated action or habit of the soul, and as such, undetachable from it. It is a permanent element of consciousness which, in view of this permanent element, appears from the outside as something stable. What then is matter? A colony of egos of a low order, out of which emerges the ego of a higher order, when their association and interaction reach a certain degree of coordination. It is the world reaching the point of self-guidance wherein the ultimate reality perhaps reveals its secrets and furnishes a clue to its ultimate nature. The fact that the higher emerges out of the lower does not rob the higher of its worth and the dignity. It is not the origin of a thing that matters. It is the capacity, the significance, and the final reach of the emergent that matter. Even if we regard the basis of the soul life as purely physical, It by no means follows that the emergent can be resolved into what has conditioned its birth and growth. The emergent, as the advocates of the emergent evolution teach us, is an unforeseeable and novel fact on its own plane of being and cannot be explained mechanistically. Indeed, the evolution of life shows that though in the beginning the mental is dominated by the physical, the mental, as it grows in power, tends to dominate the physical and may eventually rise to a position of complete independence. Nor is there such a thing as purely physical level, in the sense of possessing a materiality elementally incapable of evolving the creative synthesis we call life and mind, and needing a transcendental deity to impregnate it with the sentient and the mental. The ultimate ego that makes the emergent emerge is immanent in nature and is described by the Quran as the first and the last, the visible and the invisible.